Look, I don't care what anyone says. Canada's governing class hates Donald Trump, hates the United States, and will drag us into a trade war in the process. So this is going to be fascinating, isn't it going to be? We were going to touch on Melanie Joly's comments while over there in Europe in these different meetings and comments she's made. And as well, Conservatives come out swinging on Mark Carney today. Michael Barrett does a press conference from the Hill this afternoon explaining exactly what they want to see Carney do and making sure he discloses his financial interests. So the pressure's being put on from the Conservative side officially in a more of a demonstrative way. Let's get into the show, shall we? I want to specifically bring up Melanie Joly, who has made a couple comments while over in Europe, poking the bear, making backhanded statements about America to the Europeans. It just doesn't bode well. It's not smart, especially when you share a border with that country. But this is what she's doing. So she dropped some interesting intel on us. First off, she told Europe that Canada stood up to America, and that's what everyone needs to do. And this is what was detailed in a Star article. Europeans can learn from Canada's dealings with U.S. President Donald Trump, from Joly. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Canada's plan to retaliate if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to slap Canadians' goods with across-the-board tariffs has drawn the attention of the Republican administration and fueled a recent surge in support for the Liberal Party. And she's not wrong. It has fueled support. You've just created an enemy out of our greatest trading partner, but, you know, whatever. Joly made comments Saturday during a panel discussion on trade at an international security conference in Munich, Germany, where she told European leaders they could learn from Canada's experiences dealing with Trump. So my point to all of you is, we are the canary in the coal mine. She told the audience, if the U.S. administration is doing that to Canada, you're next. The minister said there was a big change when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded to Trump's initial threats by saying Canada would impose a 25% retaliatory tariffs on $155 billion worth of U.S. goods and respond swiftly to any steel and aluminum import taxes if they are imposed on Canada. The U.S. government immediately took notice when stock markets started tanking and American consumers started fretting about the price of gasoline going up, Joly said. Ultimately, none of us will change the perceptions of President Trump, she said. The only people in the world that will make sure that tariffs are not imposed are the American people themselves. When they understand that this is affecting the price of gas at the pump and groceries, they'll say, enough. Joly said the proposed U.S. tariffs represent an existential threat to Canada because they could lead to the elimination of hundreds of thousands of jobs. She said Canada and the European Union should coordinate efforts to respond to Trump's threats. And that is not always an encouraging thing to read. Urging and trying to get the European Union on your side to fight back against America. Instead of addressing the issue that we've talked about on the show ad nauseum with the threat coming from China through the fentanyl trade, through the Arctic, through influence on our political officials, through members of the United Front appearing at political fundraisers for the Liberals. You know, all these things that are happening where you have a country who doesn't like your way of life, is the opposite to your way of life, or at least should be the opposite to your way of life, are now having an influence in your politics, influence on your elections, and influence on your culture. That's some people would see as a bad thing. And Trump calling this out through the tariff threats to get your attention because you haven't been doing it for the past 25 years is what the plan is here. Oh yeah, I forgot. Did we mention that this has also been an issue under the Biden administration? That they brought this up, that they got to the point of refusing to share intel with us because they gave up on Canada taking the threat seriously? Right. No, you're going to come join us. We're going to fight against Trump. This is not a good thing for Canada. And this is why we need to get this administration out of leadership, out of power, and get in a government that we can hold accountable and get a government who could hopefully, prayerfully, actually listen to the things that Canadians want and need. So that was point one. Then you have point two, where Joly, in the same interview, and she talks about how Canada's going to invest more money into Africa, more money into giving foreign aid there, which is getting the Conservatives all hot and bothered, understandably so. So that's just the one thing. But then she takes that as an opportunity to throw another jab at the Trump administration.
When it comes to Africa, we've been investing more than $4 billion in Africa over the last 5 years. Canada is present and will continue to be present. And contrary to certain countries, we believe that international aid is important and will continue to invest in it.
Another piece on the same trip, talking to the same people, explaining Canada's stance on foreign aid, saying, no, we believe, unlike other countries, we believe in giving foreign aid. There we go. Liberals skewing the issue yet again. No, the problem is there's been out of control spending under the guise of foreign aid happening in the United States, and it's obviously happening here as well. But you want to make it about, like the liberals are down in the States are doing, about helping other people. No, it's you guys using our global affairs to funnel money to your special interest groups in other countries, to acquire favors from people in other countries, and using the taxpayer system to defraud taxpayers. That's what we learned in our episode this morning of how they dilute and obscure the financial data so that it's hard to understand that even a trained accountant has a hard time going through the financial data that your government puts out. That is the issue we're facing. It's not about helping Africans. No, we hate the amount of money that you waste to enrich your friends off the backs of our people. That's the issue. That's the problem we're having. And that's what we want to call it. And again, it goes back to the diplomacy issue of instead of trying to work with the Trump administration and try to figure out get to the bottom of the threats that are actually happening here, because we still haven't heard a dang thing from the fentanyl czar that was appointed. Haven't heard a dang thing. Been about a week. Still haven't heard a thing. What's his plan? What's he going to do? It's February 18th, for goodness sakes. We're about 10 days away from potential across the board tariffs. But instead of talking about your plan to address the fentanyl issue, no, we have sending the foreign affairs minister to Europe to then crap on Trump. All right. These people need to leave immediately. And hopefully we can see it happen. Because today, as I mentioned earlier, Michael Barrett and the Conservatives are now putting a line in the sand. They want to know what Carney's financial dealings are before he becomes prime minister. We want to hear and him divulge what his financial interests are. We want to know. We want to hear it. You know, Michael Barrett addressed a few different things about his 11-minute address. He addressed the carbon tax, economic policies, allegations of hypocrisy and deception, ethics rules, and calls for reform to our system here in Canada. But he also, as I said, wanted to bring specific issue to Carney's financial dealings. And here's a 2-minute clip of him calling him out and what he wants to see happen within our system, addressing Mark Carney and how he wants to take on the role of Prime Minister.
Carbon tax Carney must come clean with Canadians about potential conflicts of interest and all of his business dealings. We're in a very interesting and troubling place for Canadians with Carbon tax Carney having been a senior advisor appointed by Justin Trudeau to advise him, but done in such a way to shield him from all of the standard and customary accountability. Justin Trudeau gave Mark Carney all of the power and none of the accountability that comes with it. You look at some of the positions that we know Carbon tax Carney held at the same time, some of the decisions the Trudeau Liberals took. For example, the Trudeau Liberals changed mortgage rules in such a way that would benefit the bottom lines, pad the pockets of mortgage companies, private mortgage insurers, like the one owned by the company Mr. Carney represents at the same time he was sitting in the Prime Minister's office. While Mr. Carney was chairman of the board at Stripe, Stripe was shielded from the government while they were gouging Canadians. This is the same problem we have with Brookfield trying to enter into a pension scheme with the Canadian government worth $10 billion to Canadians, while Mark Carney was sitting in the Prime Minister's office. The customary and normal accountability practices have been completely disregarded by Mark Carney. Now, he has claimed that he will make disclosures should he be successful in an election. But what that means is he could get through the Liberal leadership and through a general election, and it would be an additional 4 months before those disclosures were completed. All the while, being able to potentially make decisions that would further enrich himself and call into question the normal practices that prime ministers and party leaders are expected to follow.
There you go. There you have it. And in addition, people have questions about Brookfield. I think Canadians should have questions about his dealings at Brookfield and how not only the pension scheme, which is a whole other issue, which I tend to almost forget about at times because there's so many dealings that Brookfield has had with the Canadian government over the past 4 to 5 years. But yeah, to access $10 billion of Canadian funds to be used to invest for Brookfield is, quite frankly, crazy. But we also think about the 46 green energy projects that Brookfield has engaged on with the Canadian government. Don't even mention the issue of him working with Stripe on the board of Stripe, and what Barrett mentioned as well. These are the questions we have. These are the questions we want to hear. What do your financials look like? What were your kickbacks? What did you get back from this? How did you handle this? We need answers before you become a prime minister. These are things that we should know before you become PM. And Rosemary Barton posed these questions. If you remember back a few days ago on CBC, he did an interview with Rosemary, and she asked those exact questions of him, and he wasn't a fan of it. You could tell he was annoyed that she was asking him. How dare somebody ask you questions about your financial dealings and how you to leverage government to get financial kickbacks? How dare someone ask about that, right? Because that was his attitude when Rosemary asked him right here.
You resigned from more than 20 corporate boards, I think.
Not corporate boards. Most of those boards were philanthropic or charity.
You are not yet subject to ethics requirements.
I don't have any power, Rosie.
No, but would you put anything out there for Canadians?
I love how he thought he said something. He did something there. Well, I haven't been in power, Rosie. Okay, buddy. Okay.
To better understand your business dealings and your financial picture
Well,
before you're elected?
Obviously, I'm going to comply with all the ethics guidelines, conflicts of interest guidelines, blind trust.
But during an election, before you have a seat, would you be willing to show Canadians what they're dealing with and what you've been dealing with?
Well, let's be clear.
Look how mad he gets there. He gets so mad.
I was UN Special Envoy for Climate Action. I was chair of chair of Brookfield on a number of philanthropic boards and did a lot of charity and other work. So that's all disclosed in the public domain. I will immediately subject myself, if I am elected Liberal leader, of course I'm going to immediately subject myself to all the ethics guidelines, conflicts of interest guidelines, other guidelines in order to pursue.
That isn't the question, my friend. That was not the question. The question was, would you let Canadians know what your financial dealings were before you get power? Not once you get power, then go through the process. No, we want to know beforehand. We want transparency because people lack trust in our current Liberal government. Will you be transparent and let us know how much money you are worth and where you got your financial dealings from in terms, at least at the very minimum, tell us what were the kickbacks, if there were any, when you were doing deals on behalf of Brookfield trying to land government contracts with them. Just we want to know these questions. We don't want to know afterwards. We want to know before. And then you say, oh, I've done this work with here. I've done work with this company. It's all in the public domain. Yeah, we talked about the public domain this morning and how hard it is to go through financial documents because it's purposely made to be obscure. So yeah, I guess we can go search it up, but the regular person's gonna have a hard time finding it. So this is just another excuse to get around being held accountable for the shady business dealings that he's been engaged in. These are the questions we wanna know. And that's why Michael Barrett came at him so hard, or at least the Conservatives are starting to establish a more pronounced messaging around this with Mark Carney and his business dealings. It will be interesting to see how this all transpires and what goes on from here. And we will be keeping a close eye on all of it. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.